His first question was something like, "What do you think about CBD and rum?" And we're live. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So, welcome to Rosie, who's with us. This is where we're taking your live questions on new product development, pitfalls and perils, which is always an exciting thing. And hopefully you enjoyed the video as well. Oh, yes, thank you, Sarah. Good point, because I wasn't recording it and I am recording it, so you just missed the intro, but never, that doesn't mind. Rosie, would you like to just tell everyone a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name's Rosie. I'm head of NPD at Atom Brands. I've been with the business about 8 years, so I've had my hand at a lot of different product development and it's been a lot of fun.
Good. Was there anything from the last, because I know you watched the video again just to check that it was all right. Was there anything that when you were watching it that you think, oh, I wish I'd mentioned that, or any, like, just before we start off, whilst we're waiting some questions to come in, was there anything like that?
Not really. I don't know whether because we did the panel and then I did my talk, and I can't remember whether I touched on pouches very much in the pitfalls and perils. But I think the one thing that I just sort of debunking myths a little bit. People see plastic pouches and they think, oh, plastic bad, you know, Glasgow plastic bad, you know, 2 legs, 4 legs. It's not necessarily like that simple. We're looking at everything. But I think people being sort of like open-minded about plastic options, as long as they can do something with them afterwards, and you know, just thinking about things not as sort of basic black and white as sort of you might do, and you know, because plastic's not necessarily bad as long as you do the right thing with it. But that was the only thing really, was touching on pouches, because I think actually they're a very good thing.
I had a question which was about so you've created a new product, you've done all the development, you've written down what you did, because that's very important, so you can replicate it. But where do you just leave it, or do you sometimes have a taste and you think, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that? If you get some feedback from someone saying, I don't know, let's just say that it's some, let's say it's a flavored gin or something like that, and someone says, I think it's a bit sweet. Someone else might say, I don't think it's sweet enough. Like, how do this feedback that you might get, and some of that might be formal and some might be informal, how do you incorporate that and then go forward and maybe make some tweaks to the product, or do you just totally leave it alone?
So inherently your question's about data, right? It's about bringing data in and being able to analyze it and use it to your advantage. So like with anything to do with data, you have to have a big enough set to make it valuable. Now, it doesn't mean that sort of if you don't get enough feedback, it's all unvaluable. That's obviously not the case. But you just have to be mindful, you know, you might get feedback that's consistent with like sort of 35 people, and then 10 people might come back and say, oh, you know, I'm not quite sure. You know, 10 people versus 35 is quite substantial. That would maybe make me go, okay, I'll take a look. That is worth investigating. If it's one person saying I don't like it versus 100 people saying they love it, I just think it's worth looking at, you know, understanding what that data set looks like. And obviously qualitative data is inherently more difficult to sort of dissect. So it depends where it's coming from, how much of it there is, and sort of what you do with that data set afterwards, I guess. But I would always take feedback on board, no matter how big or small. It's always easier to go back and look at something when you're in the development stage or just soon after than, you know, later on when someone goes, I told you about that, why didn't you listen to me? That's never a fun conversation to have.
No. And so let's say again with this example, that you go and you find someone who has some expertise on it, right? So they're like a professional and they do this for a living, and you're getting that feedback from them. How do you then decide, like, do you test it and see what it's like? So let's say you've made the decision that you want to, for this case, adjust the sweetness level or adjust the level of botanical or something. So, you know, like, actually we do probably want to change something. How do you go about doing that? Do you do a small test, or do you make that change, or like what is it that you would do? I'm really talking about, it's about tweaking. So you've made the decision. you want to tweak your product a little bit. How do you go about doing that? Because I'm sure, like with stuff that you've worked on, like you've had to tweak things, and sometimes that's for a more technical reason, and sometimes that can be based for really just a flavor reason. So there's nothing technically wrong with it, but you want to improve the flavor experience. How do you go about doing that?
Well, I think, if you've already made the decision, you do it, right? That's the thing. If you've said, right, okay, this needs changing, then you go ahead and you change it, and you try and do that as quickly and cheaply and easily as possible, affecting as few of the moving parts as you possibly can. But yeah, I mean, testing's great. I think sensory sessions are a great idea. Blind testing, blind taste testing and stuff like that is always a really interesting way to sort of really understand it and unpick it. And because, as we all know, we're heavily influenced by our environment and our surroundings. So it's very, very interesting. I found myself feeling very humbled in blind taste tests.
It's good practice for sure. Yeah, please, if anyone's got any questions, please do send them in. Bernie, if you've got any questions, please send them in. That'd be great. Yeah, I mean, so there's a regular thing that you do then, like, is this tasting of stuff. Is that something that's regularly done at Atom in general, or like to kind of like keep your taste buds in check, as it were, keep them trained?
Well, it's not really about that. It's more about consistency of product. So we're constantly taste testing things. It's important just to make sure the integrity of the product is upheld. And
is that just a production team thing, or is that like, do you get like a wider range of tasters from other aspects of the business, or is it just production that's looking after that?
Yeah, so when we were all on site in the office, it was much easier to do, right? We could just say, who wants to be part of the sensory session today? And it's not something that was held closely around production. It's something anyone in the business could get involved in. Obviously that's changed things quite a lot, having sort of limited people on site and stuff. But there is a team still, doing this, and I think it's important to carry on doing that, even when you don't necessarily have the resources that you might have had 6 months ago.
Got a good question from Bernie here. She says feedback is so important, but can be difficult to take. Any wise words to make that easier?
Don't take it personally. I know that's really, really hard. That's much easier said than done, right? It's just try to, what's that? There's a line in a song, try and forget the insults and remember the compliments, and let me know, when you find out how.
What, is that Baz Luhrmann? Where
yeah.
We thought we were going to get quite that.
That's just how I roll. But yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes feedback isn't necessarily going to be nice. I think you just have to hope that people will be diplomatic in their delivery, and sensitive to your feelings, especially if this is something that is your baby. Sometimes it could potentially be a bitter pill to swallow, but at the end of the day, it's you learn and you grow from all these experiences. So it's important to take it on, but don't let it get you down.
No, I don't think so. I remember speaking to a distiller quite recently, and they said they make a gin, and they were like, oh well, I spoke to X, Y, and Z, it was another distiller, and they're like, well, like this, like you could do that, you could improve your gin. And he's like, I tried it and it didn't make any difference. So like, hey, if you tried it and you don't think it makes any difference, then that's fair enough. Not all feedback is I think it's worth listening to. I think there's a value to it, but you don't have to take everything. And sometimes feedback can be given from a point of view that they might not be aware of everything, right? So someone might say, oh, I think you should do X, Y, and Z. And like, well, we tried that, but then like it's really expensive to do it that way, or it takes much longer, or like there can be like a number of things that you might not be aware of.
Yeah.
But I think it's always worth listening to what people say. And I think, and if you can test it as they did in this case, I think that makes a lot of sense. And if you find that it doesn't make any difference, it doesn't make any difference. Fair enough.
That's it. I mean, context is everything, right? You need to know, you need to know really why, in what sort of environment, to be able to test accordingly. And it goes back to just trying something, if fail fast, fail cheap, fail early, you can do these things, test them, try them out. If it doesn't work, just you haven't wasted that much time. You've tried it. What's the worst that'll happen?
We've got a good question from Tony here. He wants to know about doing a lot of innovation, and thus releasing quite a lot of products, versus focusing on exceptionally high quality and replicable products. So yeah, that balance. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, professionally,
can you release too many products in a short period of time?
Yeah, I mean, professionally at Atom, like, we have historically released a lot of products. At times that's been quite very full on and quite intense. Super proud of every single one, though. I wouldn't have had it any other way. But I think that's where I sort of go back to what I said in my session about sort of being agile and being able to be quite focused on a few things, get them out. So rather than working on sort of 6 things over 6 months, we'll work on, sort of one thing every 2 weeks. And that enables you to sort of double your sort of capacity, but it spreads it out sort of better. I don't know, it's high value versus sort of like lots of products out in quick succession are very different sort of customer prospects as well. They're going to be purchased by potentially very different people. But my personal preference would probably be to working on fewer things more quickly, to enable you to get higher velocity, and sort of iterate more quickly as well, because each one of those things might not be brand new. It might be iterating on something you've already done to make it better.
I guess with something like Atom, it's almost like this is about sort of 5 or 6 distilleries in one place in some respect, because each one, if you've got like the darkness Scotch, that's probably, maybe not, but possibly going to be a different market to Jaffa Cake rum or something like they're very different things. Tony has also, he followed up with saying that he's looking forward to innovating, or playing as he calls it. Well, it should be fun, but it is expensive, and I guess, and that is true. And I think, depending on what sort of things you're innovating in, there are some things that you can do to help that. I think smaller scale. I mean, one of the problems with small scale is it's really good for trying out an idea, but then it, if you then want to scale it up, it can be more difficult. So there's kind of. I remember one time we tried to make a bourbon infused gin. I think I've told you about this before, Rosie, but because the distillery was near where these biscuits were invented in London. And when you infuse it in the gin, it tasted really nice. We thought, we'll distill it. And we didn't realize, of course, when you distill it, we hot distilled it, it just tasted like burnt biscuit, which wasn't very great. But then we did it with used 500 mils of alcohol. So it was all right. So we did it on we failed very quickly and on a very small scale. So that was and
you learned a lot, so it's okay.
Yeah, only a few biscuits were wasted.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Bernie is asked, do you have a structured step-by-step process to take a new idea and make it something tangible?
No, not really. Sort of, that's a really difficult question to answer. No, we don't, because everything is different. But there is a general framework of things which you have to do before you can, get a product live. So before you go in to schedule the bottling, you have to make sure that the ingredients are approved and the recipes approved and you've got everything recorded and the label's been ordered and all that sort of stuff. So there is a skeleton sort of flow of stuff that needs to happen. But each one is still, we would take a completely new approach to, because each product is very different. So we would look at each one, and our steps to get that product live would be molded by what that product is. But generally, there's probably 20 things you have to do each time. Yeah.
Like when you have the idea, and then you've got to work out how would I do that? And that's kind of that fun testing thing. Can you get proof of concept? But then I also think and this is something that I've learned. I would say, well, once you get to the idea stage, you need to already start thinking about, how am I going to sell this? What's it going to be packaged in? And really importantly, what's the name? Because I've had some fantastic ideas. I'm like, this is going to be brilliant. You do the lookup to see if you can use that name, because it kind of has to have that, like it really fits with that name. You're like, oh, this is just going to be fantastic. And you look it up and no, can't use the name. And then you're like, can I think of something else I can do with it? And there's a number of things where, like, if you couldn't get the right name, you're like, all right, well, I'll focus on something else.
Yeah.
But it would be so frustrating to have a brilliant product.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can give an example of something, because it never happened, right? But I did some research on, there's a gin called Elbart's gin, which is like the first gin for the aviation. I thought, oh, and I found like some like serious details. Like, oh, you better recreate this sort of 1920s gin. Like you already, you can kind of start to see the ideas. But here's the thing. Someone owns the trademark. Actually, funnily enough, Aviation, the gin brand, or so I guess now Diageo maybe. But they own the brand. Like they haven't done anything with it. It's just there. They just own it. But there is no Elbart gin. But like that concept doesn't work unless you can have the name. Luckily, I just kind of done the research, and I for something else anyway, and I'd written a bit about it, and I hadn't gone down like trying to actually produce it. But that stopped it in its tracks. So I think like that's another important thing. There's a bit of a production-y question here, so I'm not sure about this, but it is in how does Atom scale up from smaller R&D to a larger production still?
It's very easy. It's all in-house. The same team deal with it that produced the liquid for us in the first place when we were in the very small scale innovation stage. They've worked on it. They've been taken on the whole journey. And once it's sort of proved itself and it's tested, by that point we can get everyone else in the business really excited about the fact that it's successful, and therefore it's really easy to do. It's about cohesive relationships more than anything else in terms of production. I think we're lucky enough to have everything sort of in-house, so that's very different than if you're working with a co-packer or a third party.
Sorry.
No, but from my experience, I think as long as you make sure you're thinking about how production are going to be handling these things. So you might go from completely hand labeling, hand waxing, casing up by hand, taping all the boxes by hand, to then going off to a line which fills the bottles automatically, corks them, labels them automatically. You don't have to touch it. It goes off the other end. So you just have to be really understanding of what you can actually move from there to there. You can't just use any old bottle. You can't use any old label. You really need to understand how you're going to move from something which is essentially innovation scale up to sort of the alpha sort of big thing.
I think the other thing is, and without giving too much of the game away, of course, like one of the things to bear in mind is that, like, for some things, like if you work smart, it is amazing how much of a product you can make actually using reasonably small equipment. I mean, that's like one of the great things that like Rotavaps and things like that have, is that like certain flavors that you might want to have, you can focus on that, and it depends on what you're making. But like certainly, like if I was a gin distiller and I had a flagship gin, I would be looking to have that flagship gin and do a lot of my innovation probably around that. I wouldn't necessarily be like doing it straight again, And if I wanted to do a lot of innovation, I think what I would do is I'd make myself like a pretty basic 3 botanical gin or juniper, coriander, angelica, and I'd have that, and then that would be like the base of my gin innovation. And then like if I want to do a Christmas tree gin or something like that, I'll get some pine needles. I've got my Rotavac with my little still, and I'll do that, and I'll get that really concentrated. And then actually that scaling up is not so much of an issue. And I think that's a bit of like a smarter way of working at it. And then actually you can have that, and then you can really like play around with how much flavor. So I think having a good foundation of spirits and building on that, I think that's the key to successful innovation. Means it also means it's not going to cost you so much either. So that would be my view. And things like having the right, if you're doing lots of little innovations, have a label where you can write in some of the details. So have a standard thing like I think, as I said before, Whitaker's does a really nice example. Have you got, Sarah, can you get me one of the Whitaker's bottles in that cupboard over there? I'll get one as an illustration. But yeah, I think what they do is, as I think I said before, Jensen's do do the same thing. They did, and I think that's smart as well. Because again, having to do all of these label runs, and of course, like you said, you have to. That's great. If you have to buy a load, I mean, even if you buy a small amount, there's a minimum quantity, right? So this is a nice example. We got the Whiskers one here, and then it's got all the relevant details and so on it, but then it's just called nightcap. Easy peasy.
Nice.
And that's like a nice way of doing some of these fun things. Hopefully that answers your question, Tony. Okay. So yes, I see your follow-up. Did my answer answer your question? Hopefully it did. Good. Okay. Any other questions from anyone else? There we go. Good. There's a slight delay, so it'll take a little bit of time to hear from people.
On your work smart, not hard thing, I think if people really think about how they can sort of maximize their value and their output, and like actually, you just think about the small things you can do and in the right order to really, really, really maximize your output. That should be the easiest way to understand and identify the ways to make you more efficient.
Yeah, I think
scaling especially.
Yeah, I think it's so much is about. I've said this so many times. So much is about experience. So much, it's just having. Because I mean, the thing is with innovation, you can get really excited about it, right? And you just want to go off but like it's worth doing a couple of these little checks. They're very boring. It's very boring to look up whether you can use a name or something. It's just like looking at words and doing a search.
It's easy and it's free.
But it is easy and it is free and it is and it is essential and it will save you a lot of time. And this, like, I guess one of the other question I had was, is there such a thing as too much innovation?
I'm going to say
can you be too innovative?
I'm going to say no and follow that up with, you can't be too innovative, but you can try and do too much. And that's not necessarily a number of products. That can be too much with one product. You can sort of, trying to gild the lily, sort of that sort of expression. It's just, you can do too much. It shouldn't stop you from being innovative, because if you're passionate about it, that should never go away. But don't try and test too much at the same time. If you've got like 5 great ideas, try one of them first. And then if that doesn't work, try the next one. But don't try and do all 5 at the same time, because you'll run out of hours in a day,
Well, like if
focus on one thing at a time, you don't lose, you don't do context switching, you're in on one thing and that's it. So, yeah.
What if I said like, I want to make a Stilton flavored gin or something like that? With that, maybe I'm pushing it a bit.
I wouldn't be surprised if someone has already done that, to be honest.
Wow, it's a lot of gin out there.
I saw a Brussels sprouts one the other day, but I'm sure there's a few of them around.
Yeah, I think Pickering's did one last. I think they're baubles. I think it's kind of. I mean, that's a different aspect of innovation, isn't it? Really, like the gin baubles and those kind of things. It's not necessarily innovation in the spirit production, but it's more innovation in the packaging, which is kind of interesting, and it's a different kind of thing. I mean, I imagine one of the problems with innovation in packaging is like there's so much that could go wrong. I mean, there's so much go wrong like producing the spirit, but like I one of the things I saw recently I was quite impressed by was it's Lafayette. It's fine because I'm going to say nothing nice about them. I think it's a lovely idea. It's a Lafayette absinthe bottle, but it's small. It's about the size of a bitters, right?
I saw it.
And you take the top off, and then this little spout pops out, and you can move it like cocktail bitters. I'm like, I think that's fantastic. But I also think like, how many iterations of that would you have to go through if you're doing something like that? How many iterations you have to go to make sure that it works properly? Even like from a point of view of like, maybe, I mean, I know it's before your time, but like the first time they did bathtub gin with the distinctive like brown paper wrapper, like, there must have been issues. Like, it's so different. No one's really done it. It's like, what are the issues with doing it? Getting it to stay on and like all this other stuff. And you have these. And I think, but what's the payoff? The payoff is that, it's this a bottle that's like very recognizable. and was totally different. When I mean, even still now, it's still there's not a lot that's like it. But certainly when it came out, it's like, oh, we've not really seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
And it, like the same with the absinthe. Like we're talking about it because we think it's innovative. So there can be something to it. But like almost partly to me, like that seems to be almost more of a risk than the liquid. Maybe because I don't understand it so well. But like all the testing and the like when it's in transit, does it work? Like, is it going to work when it's been in the bottle for 2 years? Is it all still going to hold up together and all this other stuff? So
yeah, great. I love that little thing. I think that was so cute. It's perfect size as well. So like 20 cl.
Is it on Master Malt now then? Because I was looking for it. I wanted to buy one. Sorry,
no,
doing my personal shopping.
It was at the packaging.
At the packaging. Okay, yeah, I understand. Yeah. Oh, very good for them. I'll keep an eye out for it. So we've got about 5 minutes left. So any other questions, please get them in now. Any other final sort of thoughts that you have, or anything else that's just whatever, anything else that's of interest to you? I actually have a question for you. You don't know about this, so it's a bit stressful. I was talking to someone yesterday about bottle deposit schemes, and I know you're interested in the environmental side of things. Am I right in thinking that there was some suggestion that they might have one in the UK, or have you heard anything like that?
I've heard rumours
about that.
I've heard rumours about it, but nothing confirmed. I mean, within reason. I mean, the bottle collection scheme sort of is a thing in as much as like glass banks exist. I think it's, I don't know really. I think, how many bottles do you really get through in a week? I mean,
I might not be the right person to ask.
I just thought that since I opened my mouth. I mean, I don't know. I wonder how it would be done. I mean, you already have your sort of recycling and everything like that, but I think bottle collection schemes and stuff like that only really work when you have like massive brand loyalty, or you have things which are used regularly. So like milk bottles, for example.
You need it to be reused as well. That's the other thing. I mean, that's really that's what the advantage of that would be. Not so much an incentive to recycle it, but an incentive to reuse it.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a great idea, but you have to find people that are and you have to find people that are really loyal to your brand to get them set up with that. You know, you think about all of these things, they're brand specific. So things like Nespresso, where they do their collections and stuff like that. I think those things can work, but I think that there needs to be a bigger sort of grouping to allow more people to be able to do that, because I think a lot of people are loyal to brands, but I think if you look how many gins there are on the market, there's a lot of people who aren't particularly loyal to brands as well. So
and even the reuse is finite. I think I asked someone that used to work at a dairy how many times like typically a milk bottle would be reused. It was only about 8 times, and then that's it. I mean, it's still better than, that's still that's 7 bottles saved, but you know, I was intrigued by that. Anyway, on that slightly odd note, I say thank you very much, Rosie, for giving us so much of your time with both the pre-records and the live sessions that you have done. And thank you to everybody for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Cheers.
Thanks, bye.
Stop the